Good evening and welcome to Nox Mente. Tonight's guest is Alex Tsakiris. Alex is the author of Why Science is Wrong About Almost Everything and successful entrepreneur turned science podcaster. In 2007, he founded Skeptiko, which has become the #1 podcast covering the science of human consciousness. Alex has appeared on many syndicated radio talk shows and podcasts both in the US and the UK. He is also well known within the parapsychology and near-death experience research communities. It's a pleasure to have him on our show tonight. Welcome, Alex.
Welcome, Alex.
Thanks, y'all. Excited to be here. It ought to be fun.
Yeah.
This is, before we get started, I want to do a little shout out and thank you to Suzanne for filling in for me last week, last minute. Things just got out of hand and I had stuff going on. So thank you, Suzanne. And I'm sorry, Trish. I really wanted to chat with you about lots of stuff. So,
I have a hard time going as far back as a lot of people seem to be able to. The first real memory I have is breaking my collarbone when I was about 4 years old. And I remember my dad tying these little brown leather shoes that I have, and I was such a hurry to run outside, and I ran outside, and I, fell down the stairs, broke my collarbone. And it's funny, those things are so much, that you can't tell whether they're a memory and a dream and all that, which is so cool in some of the stuff that you do. I guess that's my first memory.
It's interesting because that's a traumatic one, and you would think. Do you actually have a memory of the pain? Or is that long since?
No, don't have a memory of the pain. But my childhood was not particularly happy. I had a mom who had a substance abuse problem and checked out of the scene pretty early. And there was a lot of kind of turmoil. And I had a lot of nightmares as a kid, I don't know. And, they were worried about me. And I think I went and saw a doctor, a talking doctor, before anyone. That was more terrifying than anyone else because no one I knew did that, and we certainly couldn't afford it. I don't know how that happened. They were worried.
Well, that does show there was like an act of love there. Whether we're concerned about Alex, what do you? So you mentioned nightmares and stuff at an early age. Do you recall any of those images?
Yeah, I remember some pretty traditional, classic kind of stuff of, going to the door and a dark figure being at the door and the feeling of fear and, just that kind of stuff. I mean,
did
really
any of these
as a kid?
Did any of these were these reoccurring at the time?
Yeah.
So these were themes.
Yeah.
Wow.
But, as an adult, and in particular, in doing the show and processing a lot of this stuff, trying to sort through it from a both scientific and experiential level, I think I have a different understanding. At least, my story now is I understand the difference between a dream that probably is entering into that extended consciousness realm in a different way than a nightly kind of encounter. And thinking back, these were kind of to me, looking back, they seem more like the regular old scary dream of a kid who's scared during the day and can't really find a way to express it. And it pops up at night. But
yeah, definitely. It's definitely, and it is some dark content for a kid, dark figures and doors, and I love this stuff. I can relate. I had kind of a rough upbringing, and I had some dark figures that were regular characters for me in dreams. So what about, were you brought up at all with, were you outdoors? Were you in a city? Was there religion?
Suburbs of Chicago.
Oh, Chicago.
Yeah, by the train station there. And
which, north or south or west?
West.
Schaumburg?
LaGrange.
That's not so far.
Western Springs, Downers Grove.
I'm from
Lions Township High School. Go Lions.
I'm from Evergreen Park.
What?
I'm from Evergreen Park.
Evergreen, which way was that?
Oak Lawn, South Side.
Oh, okay. South Sider.
Yeah. But not a Cubs fan.
I did about a decade there.
Whatever. I'm not a baseball fan.
No, I wasn't a baseball fan either, but we were kind of driven to the White Sox. My uncle was a big White Sox fan, and he had, my family background, at least on my dad's side, and like I said, my mom was kind of out of the picture for a long time, were these Greek American people. Mm-hmm. We were brought up in the Greek Orthodox Church, big part of the culture. And I tell my kids now, they have no clue. We don't do any of that stuff. But it was so strange. I mean, people don't get this. Growing up in Chicago, we were Greek. Mm-hmm. We were Greek. I mean,
you had shit to do every weekend. You had your weekends planned for like weeks and weeks.
What's that?
You had all your shit planned for the whole year on weekends, like nephews and nieces.
You did that, mm-hmm. But I guess what I'm saying, Jerry, is it's like I get the Jewish thing when I talk to Jewish people, and they think they're Jewish. They think they're Jewish. It's like, you're secular, you kind of get together and do some things and have some meals. There's nothing really religious about it. We were Greek in the way I had never been to Greece. I didn't speak Greek, although when I went to church, everyone did. But that was the identifying, cultural thing. And it's like, it's not until you get much older, as an adult, and you go, what the hell were all these people sitting around talking about Greece? We're in America. It's not like we're, in a suburb of Athens here. What is going on? And it's something unique to that time period, something unique to that place. Chicago has a large Greek population.
Yes.
Hey, it's cool.
A pining, isn't it? Pining for home. Pining for home.
Well, in a way. I don't know. I think it also says a lot about our need for community, our need to, it's how we form cults, why cults and religions and all these things, right. There's a lot going on there, but that's the world that I was in. But my dad had kind of broken off from that. He was the first person in his family to marry someone who wasn't Greek.
Ooh.
And I told you the story. So you see how that turns out.
Oh, yeah. And I bet the Greek side was like, we knew it.
I was dipped into the Greek culture quite a bit. My brother married a Greek girl who was just like, she was 30-something, lived at home still. That's how Greek they were.
Family.
Yeah, I'm sure we know some of the same families because it's a pretty tight community. But yeah, I got the whole thing, all of it.
Yeah.
My brother actually converted to Greek Orthodox to get married.
Oh, wow. Yeah. I worked for a Greek man up in Uptown called TK's. It was a bar, and they were old school Greeks. Some of them were from Greece, and it was constant ouzo, Lanishka, ouzo, and everything was Greek. Greece created the world. Greece created everything. And I was just always thought it was so funny that they had me as a bartender. I've no Greek in me. So, but I did get a feel on the culture. I dated his son for a minute after. I didn't know his son at first, but that's another story. So I have a small feel for it. I enjoy the Athenian Candle Company is where I still order a lot of my candles and hardcore incenses down there in Chicago as well. That's a Greek business.
Cool.
Yeah, Chicago's got the Greeks. So when in this period when you're getting the talking therapy, do you remember what ages you were?
No, I was young. I was like 8 or something.
And during that time, was it affecting your dream content that you can recall?
No, and I only went a couple times. I was totally freaked out at the idea of going and sitting down with the doctor. It wasn't doing me any good. And they were just, credit to my father that he was extremely open-minded. That hey, this isn't a stigma. Let's see if this guy can kind of help, kind of thing. It's incredibly open-minded, but no, it wasn't helping. So I only did it a couple times. It was just kind of interesting.
Yeah, it is. It is interesting. Okay, so let's move on to what were your ideas of. So we got an idea of your cultural experience in Chicago and kind of a space there, and a little bit of your emotional tone. What was your idea about things outside of you? So, and then this moves into a little bit of the esoteric ideas. So since you didn't really, you were at church here and there, but did you believe in ghosts? Did you believe in Santa Claus? Did you have any of those kinds of things floating around? Was there something scary under the bed?
No, my upbringing was very, like that just like that movie, that guy in Chicago who's the guy that made the movie with the kids out in the sleigh, and the one kid
John
sticks
Hughes.
his tongue. What is it?
John Hughes. Oh, The Christmas Story.
Yeah, The Christmas Story, which a guy from Chicago and wrote. I mean, man, it was just
Ralphie.
Ralphie.
Ralphie, yes.
So it was just go to school, play football, flood the backyard, play hockey in the winter. Follow my big brother around. We're into sports, just regular stuff. And then from there, it was just, be successful, make money, get a good job, go to school. Yeah. There was nothing.
So you were on the wheel, just fully moving forward. Okay, so on that note, so let's move into how you experience dreams in general. So colors, black and white, audible stuff.
Well, not to skip too far ahead in the story, but most of my experience with dreams really picked up and started happening as part of the show. Skeptiko was the podcast was my attempt to not break out of. I had done the kind of business thing, and I'd gotten where I wanted to go, and I had always had these burning questions about who am I, why am I here, kind of thing. And so I was open to exploring everything in all those areas, and dreams was certainly one of them, because anyone who goes through life understands that they're so woven into our culture, dream analysis, and what does your dream mean, and a scary dream, or this and that. So I'd only had this surface level kind of understanding, but I knew that there was something to dive more deeply into. And, one of the first people I really talked to on Skeptiko about that was a guy named, who is now, I have to put doctor on his name because he just got his PhD from what is school, London, whatever, really elite school that he dragged him through the mill for 5 years to get that PhD. But Andy Paquette. So Andy has had this incredible history of 20 years of precognitive dreams. And Andy, like Jerry and I were talking, is kind of a tech guy, more in the animation and stuff, worked in Hollywood, but a guy who said, hey, I need to create a database with my 5,000 dreams, and I need to code them all these different ways. It's an incredible feat that he did to pull off, and the analysis that he's been able to do. But to read his book and to talk to Andy, and we've become friends, it opens up a whole other realm that I didn't know anything about. And that led to an investigation of lucid dreaming, which I had no idea of. And then lo and behold, I'm sharing this with my son, my oldest son, and he starts telling me, I do that every night. I mean, that's my experience every night, you know?
Yes.
And at first I didn't believe him. I mean, straight up, I just didn't believe him. And the more we talked, the more we explored it. And he was an incredible and is less now. So I say was because less so now, but was an incredible lucid dreamer. And through him, I started having lucid dreams and started experiencing myself, which I'm sure you guys exploring the show have found over and over again that, you know, that happens. It gets spread, you know?
It is a bit like a virus. I hate to, virus has that kind of negative connotation, but it's a synergenic thing. Wait, how old is your son? So what years was he really actually moving through deep lucidity in his dreams?
He's 23, and this was when he was a teenager.
That's remarkable. I love it. And okay, so just to back up a little bit, so you gave us an idea that you were on the wheel that was expected of you to do the general things in life, get these accomplishments done. What actually? And you started Skeptiko 10 years ago. What actually was the catalyst to get you into that state? Into I'm looking into this stuff now.
Well, you know, as I've always said the story a bunch of times, but it's true. It's like, you know, I was in it for the money, and I had a certain goal in terms of I felt, you know, I saw other people were able to make money, particularly in high tech, and I said, you know, I want to do that. I ought to be able to do that. I'd really like to do that. I'd like to have. Jerry and I were talking about my job out of college was Price Waterhouse, you know, working downtown in St. Louis, wearing a suit, and you know, being a consultant. And I sure as hell knew I didn't want to follow in the footsteps of those people ahead of me, you know. So I wanted somehow something different, but I wanted a piece of that pie. But at the same time, I was a yogi. I kind of got into yoga, and it just really had an impact on me almost from the beginning. And that was an interest of mine that I was able to kind of maintain. But I always had this idea that if I had enough money, you know, not like a wild amount of money, but enough money where I was comfortable, I would pursue, you know, these deeper questions. And I thought that's what everyone would do. I thought everyone, gee, if you know, everyone talked about retiring or having, you know, money or not having to work. And it's like, yeah, well then, you know, what would you do? Well, then I'd go, you know, I'd figure stuff out. Well, you know, I thought, no, you know, no one's interested. It's just like, but I was, so I did it. So I just started calling people up, you know. I say, hey, what's up, dog? Tell me. And, you know, it was a good strategy. Really, it was, because when podcasting was getting started, and I was able to call up some pretty incredible people, you know, Rupert Sheldrake and Dean Radin were some of the first people I had on the show. And, you know, I was comfortable enough behind the mic to have a decent conversation. And before you know it, you know, the podcast was off and rolling. And really in those days, it was really about 10 times bigger than it is now, because I wasn't doing anything, but there wasn't a lot else out there like that talking about that stuff. And it drew an audience.
It's funny now that there's so much out there, it's hard to find good content. So it's the other extreme.
True, but I like it like this. I like having a lot of stuff out there. I like the long tail, man.
Me too. The long tail's best. Chris Anderson.
Yeah, so agree. So I just want on your son again. Did he ever mention so he'd been lucid dreaming naturally. Did he ever mention anything that maybe how it happened or when it first started happening? Like, did he have any insight for you on that?
Oh, yeah, tons. I mean, I tell him to this day, and he doesn't want to hear it because he's kind of off doing his thing. But I tell him, you know, dude, you're a shaman. I mean, you got to face that. I mean, the purple panther that's sitting up on the rock telling him these secrets in the universe. Wow. Yeah, and he's like coming back to me. And I remember asking him, questions about that I was running into in Skeptiko. I mean, I always remember this one question I asked, the predetermined question.
Yes.
Is it predetermined? It thinks for a minute. It was almost like somebody who knew the answer and was trying to think of a way to put it. He goes, well, it's kind of like a Rubik's Cube. You can turn it any way you want, but it's going to come out. It's going to come out. So it doesn't matter the pattern you take. It's going to come out. Whoa.
Yeah, he sounds awesome.
But it's true, though. I mean, either way you look at it, it's either or, and you can't get away from it. So.
And there's a lot of different paths you can take. You can turn that wheel a lot of different ways, and then you're going to reach some points. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if any of that's true or not.
Well, I find it significant that this is your son, right? That this came from, whatever the upbringing was, he was able to be in that space and inhabit these other dimensions.
Kids, I mean, we have 4 kids,
Yeah.
So it's like everyone is different. And my oldest son, that was a period. I mean, he's not really into that right now anymore.
Yeah.
And like I said, I always kind of put the bug in his ear and say, you're a shaman, don't forget.
Yeah, but you need to, well, I'm sure there's, maybe he needs to meander away and come back.
Maybe.
So Alex, tell us about how you dream though now. So just in the general, let's wide swatch this. Like generally, what do your dreams, what's that landscape look like?
Varied, I mean, again, I've been playing around with it for years because it's become an interest through Skeptiko and learning, different things and the precognitive dreams. And I kept a dream journal for a while and experimented around with that, experimented around with waking myself up at different times and trying to tap into that hypnagogic kind of state when you're going to sleep and waking up. But just toyed around with it, never, persisted very far with it. The clincher for me, and I feel like this was just an incredibly important insight, personal insight for me, but it's at the Skeptiko kind of truth evidence level, is what lucid dreaming taught me is that all my dreams are lucid. It's my mental state to be aware of the lucidity and the control that I have. Mm-hmm. And so what I found and discovered just through my dreaming and through watching my dreams is moving in and out of that a feeling of control that you have in a lucid dream. I felt like I was moving in and out of different and familiar dream states, if that makes any sense. So completely. As I was losing control, I was going, oh, I know this. This is what it's like when I'm dreaming all the time. And then when I moved into that space of feeling more in control, I go, oh, this is cool. I'm in control. And then, suddenly over a period of a few of those, I woke up and I go, I am generating this stuff all the time. I am the creator of this script and theater all the time. There's that distinction between the lucid dream and a regular dream became much, much fuzzier to me.
What about, so on that, which is usually this is why our new format is just flowing. But further down in the way we used to ask questions was basically this. So then what is the difference for you between dream state, dream time, and what we consider waking and waking time? Because we go through, as you know, we go through these same rhythms in waking life as well, where we're more conscious at certain.
Well, I always thought, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I didn't. I was waiting on you.
Oh, okay.
I think we had a little like computer fuzz
you cut
there.
out a second. What was the question?
No, it was. I remember the question. If you want me, I'll just go on it. So I think that. Are you okay, Jerry? Should I go?
Yeah, go. I'm sorry. Oh, yeah, you're good.
Now I'm having trouble remembering the question.
I couldn't remember.
So, you guys, it's hilarious. Full moon time. Okay, so that state between, we're just talking about lucidity within dreams, right? And how we're basically always lucid, as we are here in waking life. Well, where is the line between that and this?
Right. Again, I don't. That question doesn't draw me in so much as does the, and you guys probably know, I'm sure you know this, but like one of the tips you'll get when you're learning to lucid dream, or I don't even think that's the correct term, but that's the term people say, is learning to lucid dream, rediscovering, because we all do it, I think, all the time, but is to question this state of awareness, non-dreaming, right? Like that's one of the things they'll tell you is during the day, just kind of get in a relaxed state and say, am I dreaming? Am I awake? And just be in kind of that hypnagogic state just a little bit, just by asking yourself that question. And this isn't me. This is just one of the things I picked up from one of the guests, kind of a classic way.
Yeah, it is classic.
Classic. So I found that directly gets to your question, is tricking your mind, your consciousness into playing around with this idea of what is, loosening that up rather than tricking is maybe a better term. I did find, I thought that was effective at times.
Yeah. I agree. And I think for me at one time, it was a great tool, or when you walk through a door, to stop and acknowledge that you're dreaming, and the doorway is a symbol and moving through. But I was looking more for your opinion of this state of consciousness that we're in right now, as it relates to other states of consciousness, such as memory and dream, in context to this conversation.
We didn't ask him about astral space yet.
Well, I know, I'm sneaking around.
Okay. It gets tough. It gets tough. I mean, because again, if I'm gonna keep it real,
keep it real, Alex.
I'm kind of a yogi. I'm kind of more drawn to the yogic kind of ideas that make more sense to me. And not that they don't have a whole lot to say about dreaming, but it just all seems like, different aspects of this play, like the same with the spirit realms. It's like not too much to get to, understand it, organize it, but I mean, it doesn't motivate me very much to ask those questions, other than to look at the science of what people are doing. And that's another way of playing. I mean, science is another way of playing. It's not a reality. I'm not saying because, and those are some of the more fun discussions I've had, particularly recently on Skeptiko, is like with Dean Radin again. We just had him back on because he wrote this book on magic, and I love Dean, and he's awesome. He is such an important figure in history, in the history of science. And that's one of the questions I had for him, is like, what do you think the legacy of Dean Radin is going to be? Because it's going to be huge, because he was right. And he took all the shit that could be laid on somebody, and he prevailed, and he was right. But having said that, now he's off dabbling in this magic thing, and he's doing it in a way that I don't think totally makes sense. I mean, if you're going to go the magic route, and same with stretching this dream consciousness thing too far, you run into the consensus reality thing, which is like, hey, It's all bullshit, right? I mean, we're creating this consensus reality, and we're playing and talking about this stuff and talking about spirits and dreams and all the rest of this stuff. But at some level, we've already called that into question in a way that makes it difficult to take it too much more seriously than just informed play that maybe motivates us to get up tomorrow and figure something out, that feels right for the next time. You get what I'm saying, right?
Oh, absolutely.
But I would say part of the limitation is materialist science. They won't consider things, paranormal things, as science or try to investigate them. I mean, they can't. I understand why.
True. They can't.
So they won't. I mean, that's why.
Well, but hold on. I mean, if they can't.
They can't.
So that's the dilemma. But they can't on a couple of different levels. They can't in the societal, institutional, this is how the game is played.
Right.
But they also can't in the sense, and this is what
they can't measure it.
What's that?
They can't measure anything.
Exactly.
Right.
And that's when I wrote the book a couple of years ago, and I always remember it's a great experience. Great experience writing that book, and then going to Rupert. Rupert Sheldrake wrote the foreword to it, and Rupert wrote the worst, most non-endorsement forward. And he said, I just can't go there. I gotta kind of hold on to the science thing and kind of this and that. And it's like, I love it because I think I was right. I think I was more right than I even knew at the time, because the basic premise of that book was exactly that. If you get consciousness wrong, you can't get much right. So none of it really makes a lot of sense. You want to say, the example I used in the book is, we're going to have a little experiment here. We're going to see what temperature water boils at. It's like, great. Well, we'll measure that. Let's control for all the variables. Let's control for altitude. Let's control for all these. Well, let's control for how the spirit realm feels today and how many angels are on the head of that thermometer. All those things are now on the table, and you can't take them off the table. So all you can do, and you can't control for them. So to that point, they can't do it because of the institution, but they can't do it because once you get there, you're like, oh, hell, we can't go.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
And then, the table's not even there.
Exactly. And we've known that for 100 years.
So do you think that so I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, do you think that at some point we had a handle on this and it diverged, or we lost it, or was, is this an antediluvian condition? Do you think?
Yes and no. I mean, I think the myth of progress that you're alluding to is definitely a reality. We can see it all over the place. But I meant
more like the consciousness exploration, that being the science at some point to our civilization, and that's been lost.
So let me make sure I'm. So you're saying, in what time period are you suggesting?
Egypt back then.
Okay, so that's a tough one. To me, it seems clear that there were a lot of advanced technologies, ways of knowing. I mean, that's almost undeniable. I haven't investigated enough to really understand how all that plays out. Well, the thing I've focused more on is in the more recent history. I mean, in the last 100 years, 200 years, there have been plenty of people that have popped up and have, if not figured this thing out all the way, have had a pretty good handle on it. And those voices have been asked to kind of step aside. And one of the ways that do that, I always mention, is the shut up and calculate thing, which is like, look, that may be true, but this is a better way for us to get that next iPhone out. That next version of the software is to more or less ignore that and focus on this. And then when that becomes institutionalized, I mean, then you have what you have. And then you wonder, is someone in control of that? Does that serve someone's interest? I think that's something that's come up more and more in the show that I think is definite reality, which is like, hey, if that was your job to control the masses, you wouldn't want them thinking about this stuff. I mean,
no, especially I think that pretty much started with the Industrial Revolution and education system, and all that. Back then in the 1700s, when that all started up, they wanted perfect factory workers. They didn't want critical thinkers.
Yeah, I mean, we could have a whole discussion on that, but I think that gets overblown. I mean,
I don't think it happened immediately. I think it was a long plan.
I don't think it was a plan. I don't think it was a plan in the same, and I think that's a misstep by a lot of conspiracy people. I don't think it was a plan any more than, like you and I were talking before the show about, Bill Gates and Windows 3. It was a kludge, man. And like you said, Jerry, you understood the difference immediately when we were talking about the Arthur Anderson consultant versus the kid that's got that fire in his eyes and is going to sleep under his desk and crank out that code because it's the most important thing in the world and becomes a multimillionaire. And then 5 years later, people are going to go, oh, well, he's so connected. He was set up, this. No, man. He just, so it is not, I think. So when that, it's like the whole robotics and AI thing. I mean, that's real, but somebody planned that? I mean, really?
Well, don't you think it's more synchronistic? We're kind of all working towards something and then creating, like it seems like everyone's furthering tech and then tech furthers itself, the whole Moore's Law thing, but on a different level, almost on an esoteric level.
I don't think so. I think that's in play. I think the esoteric level is in play. I think the spiritual influence is in play. But I think the overriding, that's just my opinion. We're just shooting crap about stuff
right.
I don't normally get a chance to talk about. But I love that guy, and I forget his name now, the guy who did, and then he was kind of later outed as maybe kind of mixing the sources a little bit. The guy did a one-man show on how about China and exposing the work in China and the guys who make the iPads and the iPhones and have never seen an iPad.
Oh, yeah.
And how
what was his name?
Yeah, and the great point I liked, he said, there's this longing for everything, for things that are handmade. He says, well, let me tell you, everything is handmade. I went to China and I went in this factory and people are jumping off the building to get out of it. But when they're in it and they're forced to work those 20-hour days, to barely get by, they're making all this stuff by hand. And as soon as they can, they'll get a robot in there to do it. But, to think that it ain't planned out. It's just, the next step of somebody trying to make a buck, somebody trying to optimize it. It's the haves and the have-nots.
Well, that's what I'm saying is like the synchronistic aspect of it. Like with when conspiracists talk about the they, right? Child and Ford and all these, they were all trying to make their buck, right? And it seemed to be around that same time that it was good to do business together. And then now all of a sudden you have a cabal, from the outside looking in. And so my question always was it's just like kind of riding new waves of advancement, and you have people that are cresting the waves, and because they're the ones doing well, and the divide is obviously large at times, the haves and the have-nots, there's a projection onto these people that are doing well that they are in control. So that's what I'm saying, in a synchronistic way. So it doesn't have to be that Ford and Rothschild and Vanderbilt are in a room smoking cigars saying, ha, 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 now we're going to do this.
In fact, they were actually enemies.
Right. Well, then there's been contrary stuff about that too, that they didn't all start out that way, at least. Business went wrong.
I have read that Ford did make that statement. He wanted factory workers, not thinkers. And that's why he had gone to Prussia to look at their education system.
But still, like, my point is, like, the whole synchronistic thing. So this industrial revolution is happening. There's obviously going to be people, you know, on the crest of the wave. And so then everyone else that's not on that, by the laws of whatever we're talking about, that gave these guys the head, it looks, if you're not the one doing well, if you're the one slaving more in the system, then it's easy to project on a group of people that seem to have it together, whether or not they're even associated.
Well, I just think all those things are true and are on the table. And I mean, as far as I've been...
That table, Alex.
What's that?
That table. What table again?
You know, to tie it back to the story of my upbringing is, like I tell my kids, you know, one of the things we did as part of our family, this Greek family that we had, and Yaya, my grandmother, was an important figure in my life and awesome person. And I lived with her, and she was strictly religious and very conservative in her beliefs. But one of the things we did with Yaya was we'd go and we'd pick weeds on the side of the road, dandelions and all these other.
Oh, yeah.
Because Greeks, you know, everyone thinks Hieros and all that stuff. I mean, according to my grandmother, I mean, no one ever ate that stuff in Greece. I mean, that was like once a year when you kill the lamb. Every day you're having greens and, you know, bread and maybe a little cheese and olives. That's it, you know. But my grandmother, there was nothing that made her happier than going with that shopping bag and, you know, picking weeds. And the fact that she only had to step 2 steps, you know, and she could reach down and get another weed. And, you know, all of us are looking over our shoulder, hoping our friends don't drive by and see us. We're so embarrassed out there.
Oh, but man, I love your Yaya.
At one point I talked to her and she goes, you know, it was after a hard day of weed picking and she had her feet up, you know, goes, back in Greece, I'd have to walk 10 miles just to get one of those bags. Oh, and I don't think she was an exaggerator. She wasn't exaggerating much. So we do tend to idealize, you know, the back on the farm before they had to go into the city and work in the factory. I mean, walking 10 miles to collect a few weeds, that isn't very good either, you know.
Yeah, and that, you know, that plays into all this stuff we talk about too, and that's like the fuzzy nature of memory. Even, and we see it when people die. Really, it's very present then, because someone could have been a tyrant, and then everyone's talking about how wonderful they were. And,
or in the Mandela effect type of thing.
Alex, what do you think about the Mandela effect?
Again, I think it's true, and I think it's way overblown.
So how so do you think it's true?
Well, I think at least in some of the examples, we have kind of evidence of people misremembering on a almost, you know, societal, cultural level, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, I haven't studied it that much, but I think other ones seem highly suspect in terms of
99% of them are, but there are the standouts. I had one myself. I was taught to spell the word dilemma with an N, Dilemna. I went to a Jesuit school. That's what they taught me, you know. I went to St. Ignatius in Chicago, by the way. So, you know.
That's a good school.
And they taught me how to spell dilemma with an N, but now you cannot find that anywhere.
Uh-huh.
And there's a whole community of people. It's dilemma with an N.info. There's a website. Wow. All these people who are taught to spell it that way.
Yeah.
I don't misremember it.
Right.
So it's just interesting, you know.
Yeah.
And I could blame Google. It could be a Google scrubbing of information, because my only source of information now really, you know, I could go to the library, but that's a hassle.
But right now, your only source is your memory.
My memory.
Correct.
Correct. And others who have the same memory.
Yeah.
So my thought on the Mandela effect is there's no way to prove it's real or fake. You can say, no, these things, you're being a dumbass on some things like marketing changes in logos and branding. That stuff happens all the time. They change branding. People, I don't remember it that way. Well, it was that way once, and now they rebranded and they've got new brand everywhere. But then you get the weird ones. So.
Right. The anomalies.
So there's no way to really prove it's real or fake, technically.
So Alex, do you think so kind of in this vein and moving a little bit back into dreams, what are your ideas on the bleed through with dreams? So like when you're learning something, like what people are calling a download in your dreams, where you learned something first in your dream, or you think you did, or even the more, I guess, woo-woo stuff of the precog stuff or the prophetic stuff, the bleed through from there to here with information. Where are you with all that?
I was alluding to referencing Andy Paquette, my buddy who wrote the book Dreamer and had cataloged 20 years of these precognitive dreams. Man, I mean, you guys got to check that out if you haven't heard of him. Have him on the show. Unbelievable.
We need to get him, Jerry. You got that written down?
Yeah, and just email me and I'll connect you with him because.
Okay.
Thank you, Alex.
Love his approach. I mean, it's a Skeptiko kind of approach. A guy who's published multiple peer-reviewed papers on his dream database and had a very unique way of kind of challenging the assumption that they truly are precognitive and how you would gather statistics out of this. But I'll just give you one that I remember off the top of my head. So Andy has these precognitive dreams all the time, multiple ones every night. He doesn't even count them unless there's known people, known events, extraordinary events. So one that pops to mind is he wakes up one day and he has a memory of having a dream of someone who is an acquaintance, a friend, but not well known. And this guy is talking to someone else, and there's some kind of natural disaster associated with the weather involved. So he calls this guy up the next day and he says, he does this all the time. And I goes, hey, it's Andy. Oh, yeah. Oh, man, well, you're going to think this is really crazy, but I had this dream last night, I goes, strangest thing. My neighbor, hurricane, 2 trees fell on 2 of his different cars, Okay, thanks. Click. Another one racked up.
I live for that.
How is that not, statistically significant or whatever?
Yeah.
How is it not predestination?
Well, exactly. So it challenges our whole notion of,
I could say that let me rephrase it. One could say that there are multiple potential futures, and he's remote viewing one of them, which happens to be the one that happened. I mean, you could explain your way out of it, but that just kind of implies there's a potential predestined future.
Yeah, I mean, what it really says is we just don't have a clue.
Yeah, right.
But it's so fascinating, and this is the stuff I really love, is that bleed through, whether it is, as Jerry just said, or I don't even know all the options for how this comes to us.
Right. No.
Have you experienced personally, though, this kind of information bleed through from dreams to here?
No, I haven't, Nish. Have you ever?
I have. Yeah, often. That's why I started. I've always been fascinated with dreams because of my early experiences, and then just a series throughout my life, but not on the level of your friend where it's several a night. It's usually maybe once a week. And then I experience them, strangely enough, through deja vu.
Yes.
So that's how I'm like, oh, yes. And then because I do keep dream journals loose, very loose, I'm oftentimes able to locate when. So some have gone back years, absolutely years. And mundane. So most of mine have been mundane. Like I met somebody at a place and, deja vu, whoa. And then I go back and so I figure out it was a dream. Pretty much now at this point, I don't associate deja vu with anything other than dream recall. So I'm not sure where I stand as far as statistics with that, with other people. As far as what Jerry and I have discovered, it seems to be less common in the people we have talked with right now at this point, but there've been a handful. What about you? Your experience with deja vu?
Again, it doesn't seem like anything. It seems incredibly extraordinary to me personally, but until you hear other accounts, and then you're like, oh, okay, I better just shut up about my little, experience of knowing what this character in a movie was going to say, a second before he did. Or really what I've experienced is like everyone talks about is you're in a conversation and you know what someone's going to say a second or two before they say it in the way that they're going to say it.
That doesn't happen to you all the time?
No.
Oh, okay.
Does that happen to you all the time?
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah.
Movies, especially movies, TV shows, if I'm watching, I know exactly what they're going to say. Based on like the way it's always before pause. We're going to say, and then, it's nutty.
A lot of mine are situational and not so much played out in verbiage at all. Like it's spaces. I go into a room or it's literally like I could have painted the imagery of the scene. And some of the characters, yes, especially significant people that have come into my life, all seem to have been there at some point.
What do you guys think of the simulation theory?
We love to talk about this. Jerry, I'll let you take the lead.
No, I'd go. What do you think?
What do you think?
I think that organic matter, as we like to call it, doesn't really exist. If we can believe quantum mechanics, they can get down to the 0-point quantum field, whatever it is, where matter spontaneously materializes or manifests. So if that's the case, it probably doesn't really exist. It's more of a consciousness projection that we actualize.
And how do you resolve that with the spiritual and what the spiritual traditions have told us about the nature of that hierarchy of consciousness that leads up to some creator God that's putting the show on? What do you think about that?
I don't buy it. I think,
very good.
Yeah.
So you
think that's part of the matrix myself.
You believe in extended consciousness, no doubt.
Absolutely.
And you would agree with me that the accounts, as good as we have them, I mean, if we're going to try and be a little bit scientific, even though we understand its limitations, suggest that there is a hierarchical nature to it. There's a hierarchy to it, right? So when those NDEers come back, they said, yeah, this guy was at this level, but there was a guy at another level, and there was a guy at another level beyond that. And then we hear that again and again, not just there in the astral plane, we hear that. So are you on board? Are you on board with the hierarchy of consciousness in the extended realm? Oh, he's thinking. I got him thinking.
I don't know. You get me thinking. I'm just, hey, it's your interview.
He's smiling.
I've kind of black boxed a lot of things that I haven't worked on yet, and that's one thing I haven't worked on. I'll put it that way. I haven't thought about it too much. I do think that everything is consciousness. Everything.
Yeah, yada yada,
yada yada. Right.
I gotta go Skeptiko on you for a minute. So this is what I've been exploring, and it's interesting for me to talk to people who are exploring it as well. So I'm not trying to be too flippant. I think it's really really fun and cool, and I feel like we can talk about it.
Absolutely.
So the data chain that I see is as I laid it out to you. You know, anyone who's stuck in the materialistic, you're a biological robot in a meaningless universe thing, I mean, they're not even at the table that doesn't exist.
Right.
They're just, it's not even, it's a different kind of conversation, a different kind of toying around the cat playing with the mouse there that we could do, but forget that. Let's move on to the next one. So there is this extended realm of consciousness. Now, if we're going to try and put the alligator clips here and there, to me, the evidence of a hierarchy is just overwhelming. It's just, you can't get around it. And the people who want to get around it, I think, sound kind of sketchy. They sound like they're falling back in the,
secret society.
No, I think it sounds like, the chaos magic folks want to go there somewhat. Mm-hmm. I think the panpsychism people want to go there somewhat. To me, the evidence, the super psi people love to go there. The evidence just doesn't conform. And I think it's a disservice to try and bend it in that way. I think the uncomfortable conclusion to that is that something like God seems to be in play.
Which one?
And what's that?
Which one?
Something. See, that
was a joke. I didn't mean
it. It doesn't matter. What matters is to know that, to say, to think otherwise, you then have to construct the different reality, a different reality. What I like about the simulation, the question I love, and I give credit to one of the people in the Skeptiko forum, that's all I say. Simulation of what? Simulation of what? Then you quickly see that when we're talking about a simulation theory, we're presupposing and applying on that structure a known structure that we know. It's like, it's from the Matrix, it's from this virtual reality game it's like, no. If anything, if there is anything like a simulation in play, forget about it, because it's at a level of abstraction of information that is so far beyond what we could ever get to. It's like,
It's like the universe is a computer in and of itself. That's the kind of simulation it is, right? It's like that complex. It's like nothing we would ever think of. It's not a computer box running.
Exactly.
Something.
Yeah. It's like nothing we would ever think of. It's like, oh gosh, now the name escapes me. I'm getting old and feeble. Who's the simulation guy? The simulation guy that everyone talks about. My Big Toe guy.
Oh, Campbell.
Thomas Campbell, right? Thomas Campbell?
Mm-hmm.
Tom Campbell?
Yeah, Tom Campbell.
Nice guy. Yeah, interviewed him, but it's like, then he gets down to, I've calculated it all out. It's 60 frames a second.
Yeah, those guys.
I'm like, that's really, really good to know, man. It's 60 frames, about 60 moving. Frames. I mean, it could be off a frame or two, but about 60 frames a second. Okay.
Nice how that lines up with the flicker rate on TVs.
Yeah.
What do you think about, we've been kind of toying around with this, but how the internet in and of itself is kind of building layers of consciousness? I'm not saying it's sentient, but it's becoming more than it was, because of obviously all the input from everywhere on the I don't even want to say globe.
How about this? The internet over time is strengthening our neural pathways to make us more telepathic. It's building connections, energetic connections between people through the network, which then in turn might turn into neural pathways.
I don't think there's any question that at some level, the kind of neuroplasticity model that's in play, that is a reality, it would demand that it works that way to a certain extent, would demand that it works that way. With this entrainment thing, once you get past the fact that, they are trying to entrain us, no question. We've already uncovered that.
We are entrained. I mean, they're not trying, they've done it.
They've done it, but they've probably done it on a much smaller scale then we've kind of inadvertently done it just by, we're all entrained by just
I'm scared
each
of
other.
terrorists.
Yeah.
But if you think of like just your general consciousness, yours, and aside from your ego, where you go, where it fractals off, and so we have experiences through dreams, and we can experience memory again, and we can ponder into the future, and all these fractals of your own consciousness. Is it possible, or is it moving into that possible future where the internet, and that's what I'm calling it right now, because the online experience, I just want to call it the internet and not really associate the internet of things and not associate it with humans at this moment. Is there a point in which it fractalizes on itself the way human consciousness has?
Again, I'm kind of fronting because I'm a yogi, And
I love you fronting, Alex.
that's my Skeptiko. I'm just a front. But so the practices that I find meaningful to me on a day-to-day basis that connect me deeper with spirituality are more of the non-dual kind of things. I had a guy on the show, excellent guy named Dr. Richard Miller, psychologist and a yogi. And one of the things...
Not Richard Allen Miller, right? Did he have a hat on?
No.
Okay. He's another Dr. Richard Allen Miller. He's a spiritual tech science guy.
This guy's...
Who's a genius.
This guy's organization is IREST, IREST. And I forget what that stands for, but he's worked a lot with post-traumatic stress disorder patients, has worked a lot with the VA and with the different branches of government in bringing his particular kind of yogic meditation as a way of kind of helping these people do it. Well, when you really break it down, what he's doing is very, non-dual. And he's asking these people to ask questions of themselves that allow them to separate that consciousness, what we're talking about in terms of consciousness, to that deeper consciousness that we all sense is always there, is always observing, and playing around with that in a way that, one of the questions that is the culmination, the fifth question is there anything special I need to do to be? And I find that, especially as all the other ones are laid out, because the first one starts with, what are the boundaries of my consciousness? How far does it reach? How far out does it go? How far in does it go? And it's an interesting process. I actually produced I took his thing and I put it up on YouTube. I was like, produce, it sounds like this. I took his 5 questions, put some music on it, and slapped it up there. I've listened to it hundreds of times. I've listened to it, as a way of kind of getting me into meditation. I find it to be extremely powerful in terms of immediately breaking down some of that stuff that you're just talking about that makes it all look incredibly different. Because if I do just slip into this non-dual approach where I am observing this thing that's going on that looks a lot more like the internet and looks a lot more like this busy, endless questions, and if I can get any kind of separation on that, to observe that at all, to just sit there and be a little bit quiet on that, it all looks complete. It all looks just not as important. Not that it isn't real, not that, you won't merge with the machine and all that, but that it will always be different than the essential me that's always sat there, probably through many lives, probably through, many, has always been there. And just getting into that sense kind of puts things in a completely different perspective. There's nothing unique about that. Spiritual masters from almost every tradition have talked about that almost forever.
Yeah, it brings me to mind of, well, what you're saying brings me to mind of the empty circle. And when we get above it or beyond, or in it deeper, or wherever you find that space, I wonder. So you said something that piqued my interest here. So many lives. When you say that, and when you say that, I'm intrigued. I'm intrigued by a lot of the things you say because of your stance, and then the waters in which you find yourself swimming. Some things are juicy and seem there's a lot of contradictions in some way. So what are your ideas on other lives, as you just mentioned?
I have to, what pops to mind is I interviewed Brad Warner, who is well known in the Zen circle and is a pretty cool guy. And as is typical on Skeptiko, I gave him a really hard time because he's takes this kind of Buddhist, kind of dissing reincarnation thing, which is kind of popular among some neo-Buddhist, atheist kind of types. Not that Brad Warner is an atheist like some of those guys are, some of those Buddhists are. Because I've interviewed some of them on. That's an interesting mix. How you can get to atheism from Buddha is like that's a real fine trick there. Brad was a very sharp guy, and what Brad really he handed me my head in a way that stuck with me, that I really appreciate. When you push people, sometimes you get a good answer. And his thing was like, okay, you're calling me out because, reincarnation comes with the Buddhist traditional teaching. I get that. But also there's been this line of like, okay, so reincarnation, so what? All you have is you're here now. It wouldn't matter if you have reincarnated or will reincarnate. And this is very Zen, right?
Right, absolutely.
All that matters is right here now. So to the extent that that's a reality, we won't know. To the extent that it will be a reality, we don't know. So to go down that path is a little bit of a misstep. So,
well, is it a misstep or is it just fodder to chew,
I think
contemplation.
You also have the fact that time doesn't exist. It's just a system we've imposed and overlaid over our lives. So when you talk about a past life, in essence, you're talking about a simultaneous life. So there are no past and future lives. So just by that point alone, it's kind of, but the Zen point, to center yourself and be still and all that in the now, in this ever-present now, would totally negate the fact that anything was going on anywhere else. They seem like contradictory things within the same religion.
I agree with both of your points. And I think your first point is, profound and easier to forget. It's profound and it's easy to forget. It's like the backdoor materialism. We want to kind of forget that, go, oh, yeah. But that time thing, forget that. It's like, no, can't get around that.
No.
And the other point, I think the wonderful thing about the Buddhist tradition, as well as a lot of the Eastern traditions and the Hindu tradition, the yogi traditions, is that they're super comfortable with those contradictions. They're like, oh, yeah,
yes,
total, it's a contradiction. Got me there, buddy. So what?
They build spiritual character, spiritual hairs on your chest, right?
Yes. Yeah.
I love a contradiction. I find that it's patina in the end.
Yeah.
But it's still, so say in terms of dreaming, and fodder again, I realize we're all just contemplating in the end around this invisible table, through the act of dreaming, whatever that is and however it serves you. Is it possible that some of the content one encounters is not self in the sense, in the Jungian sense, in the modern Jungian sense of aspects of personality? And the deeper you go, the more obscure, the more symbolic they get. But possibly other lives, other times, alternate use, and to me, there's a little thread that can be woven into theory there. So if we're contemplating this idea of reincarnation without looking at it on a linear line, more the circled, right? Point to point, circled, 0 point. Is there anything there for you, Alex, in those kinds of contemplations? Are you just...
Sure.
Is it,
sure,
okay.
But why stop there?
Well, take it further, because I was walking cautiously.
So let's go to the UFO and the abduction
yes, excellent.
literature, which we cannot leave out of the equation.
Absolutely
Let's go to the whole entheogen thing, right? And Strassman is out there in New Mexico and gives these people DMT, and they pop in and they're the aliens saying, "Hey, glad you're here. We've been waiting for you." Right? So
yes,
we have the accounts. So back to your download thing that we kind of brushed over, right? This download thing pops up too, and it seems to be in that space, that extended space, but different from that space. So yeah, I totally with you, but why stop there? There's so much we could throw on.
Well, take us on a little journey here. I would love to hear your ideas on...
I don't have any UFO encounters. Do you guys have that?
The ET stuff falls for you.
I saw an orb.
In a UFO, Jerry's had his experience.
I saw it, but I wasn't cool or anything. Like, I mean, it didn't lose any time or get abducted. It wasn't cool that way. I saw an orange orb, like, fly over my neighbor's house and then make a right turn and slowly glide away out of my sight.
Well, I'll tell you, just the other day, I've never had an experience, but just the other day, my younger son comes in, and he's a teenager, and he throws a drawing on my desk. He goes, "I saw that last night. It's a triangle." And he's got written out 3 paragraphs of it did this, it did this. And,
wow.
And it appeared, came out of the water. We live right on the ocean. Came out. We live a couple blocks off the ocean, but we look right down on it. And so my older son, a few years before, was out surfing without surfing with some guys who he didn't go out surfing with him. He kind of met him out there, kind of knew him. So it wasn't like they all saw it come up out of the water, saw it fly around. They just made it for the shore. And then, years later, my younger son sees.
That's intriguing.
Yeah. So
yes.
And I say
any UFO encounters for you?
But that's not a UFO to me. To me, that's Lockheed Martin.
Well, that's a tough one to process too, because I shared that with him too. I said, a lot of people think that the triangles, they might be ours,
only because there's a patent for them on the internet.
But in the water, yes, the TR, whatever they're called,
3Bs,
right?
TR3Bs.
Yeah.
But we've been seeing them for a long time, so I don't know. I mean, I think all that's.
But then there's all the theory about how our tech, the secret level of tech is way far advanced from what the public level is.
No question. And for our purposes, you have the mind aspect of it. What's going on there? Because clearly, from all the reports we've had, one of my favorite UFO guests that I've had on is a Canadian researcher named Grant Cameron.
Yeah,
you know him. Mm-hmm. And what I love about Grant is one of the first things that he broke, and he really made a point of investigating it quite thoroughly, is something that Stanton Friedman, who we all know and been on the show, and I really like Stanton Friedman. He's been on the show a couple times, and I think he's underappreciated. Sometimes these guys get old and we forget. I'm like, oh, Stan Friedman, he doesn't know what he's talking. It's like, man, Stan Friedman is forgotten, literally forgotten.
I know it is.
But so Stan Friedman originally filed the FOA, Freedom of Information Act. They probably call it something different.
Oh, yeah. FOIA request.
I don't know what they call it in Canada, but he got the release of the Wilbert Smith memo. And Wilbert Smith was this Canadian guy who basically wound up being this bureaucrat who kind of, all the UFO stuff landed on his desk, whether he wanted to or not. And enough of it started landing on his desk that he went to the bosses and said, hey, we got to figure out what's going on. Let me go down and talk to those Americans. So he comes down, he talks to the Americans, and the Americans give him the report that he writes down in a memo, and he gives that memo to his bosses, and that memo is accidentally released in this Freedom of Information swipe that these guys do. They're just saying, hey, anything, and they get this thing. Well, the memo is written in the 50s, and it says, yes, the United States government has observed these. It is the highest level of importance / secrecy within the government, higher than the hydrogen bomb. It says a couple other important things. But at the end, it says this key phrase. Then Grant Cameron was the one to pick up on this and really punch it up. And that's that it says the associated mental phenomenon. So it says that back in the 50s, when they first discovered this, they not only discovered the craft, not only discovered the technology, but they had a sense that there was this stuff going on that they couldn't explain. The telepathic communication, the mind control, make you forget, all the stuff that now becomes standard part of the UFO lore. They knew it, wrote it in this memo, and it helps you understand why they pursued MK Ultra.
Mm-hmm.
After, of course, they wanted to control mechanism, but they also wanted to figure out if this stuff is out there, and now we know how is it done and all the rest of that stuff.
And how to shield themselves from it, too.
What's that?
And how to shield themselves from it, too. That was another point.
Which is always, I mean, if we're going to, crap on the intelligence agencies, we do have to, give them, we do want to be protected. And there is an element of, got to know what the threat is in order to protect one from it. Of course, you don't have to kill a bunch of us to do it.
Do you know who, right. That's what Bill Gates is doing, right? Do you know who the dark journalist is? That was a joke, by the way. I'm kidding. Do you know who dark journalist is on YouTube?
Yeah, I've heard him. I can't remember right off the top of my head.
It's okay. He did a show 3 weeks ago on Vannevar Bush.
Right.
Oh, it was really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And it talked all about this stuff and what was really going on, what they were really doing. And it looks, I totally forget his conclusion now, but it wasn't saucers. It wasn't UFOs. That was the cover.
He had, and there's evidence there though. Daniel is not just going off of hearsay. So the stuff that he was presenting there's some paper trail there. There's information that is leading to this.
Just leave that. I forget about that. That's not important. What is important though is Vannevar Bush started a company called something I forget in Maryland or Delaware that has these radar antenna. They're like geodesic globes, just like Epcot Center, that big thing, which are also in Pine Gap in Australia. And they're somehow connected, that there's some kind of secret technology that's in there. And that's what he was talking about. And it tied to MJ-12 and the Wilbert Smith memo because he brought it up. It was just, I thought it was really interesting. I didn't know if you'd seen it.
I haven't seen it. I'd check it out. I love, like we were talking about, there's so many different dimensions to look at this. And ultimately the spiritual dimension is what really drives me, but that doesn't stop me from getting super interested in all
right. Well, we're the same way. Yeah, I'll listen to it.
When I slice it and dice it, I come back and try and reconstruct it with kind of the Occam's razor, which I hate because the skeptics co-opted that whole thing, but it's a real thing, So it's like with the Tom DeLonge New York Times release in December, mm-hmm. which is, there you have it, right? So it's outed that these things, this technology is there. I don't think it no longer makes sense to imagine, and not that that was any kind of event. I mean, we knew that all along.
Yeah,
it just confirms it. I don't even say it confirms it because we all knew it. I mean, it's a whole different thing. I shouldn't even gone down that path. But the point is, if the technology exists, then to go back and rewrite that history that Vannevar Bush, it wasn't about the UFOs, it was about this other stuff. It's like, no, it was about the UFOs because we've been seeing the UFOs for as long as we can report them. We've been seeing them from radar and then seeing them on the ground and then the pilots see them and all that. They're there. So, it's like Joseph Farrell, I think is awesome, has a lot of good points. But it's like when he starts spinning that Nazi stuff for Roswell, it's like, what the crap? Why would you have to go there? I mean, it's like
Nick Redfern's come up with Japanese handicapped people or something, right?
I mean, it's just, to me, it's like, why create? It's not simple to say there's UFOs from other planets, but it just seems to be the best working hypothesis we have.
Well, I know for me, what is led in all this is I have a handful of experiences that are unexplainable that affected my life. And so I'm not quick to call them anything. In fact, I don't call them anything. I'm just looking for more data. But some of them certainly fit into some of these things we're talking about. And it all just makes me wonder with everyone's ideas. And I'm moving this into your ideas now that we've kind of sensed your yogic stance on death. What do you think? So when I'm asking about death, what I'm asking is, since that's clearly like a closing, or however you want to look at it, coming out of a chrysalis, a closing of a chapter, the end, but it's definitely another state that's not this state. Or is it? What is it for you? The idea of death, the process of death. Why do we die?
I don't know if I've ever really thought too much about that, because I spent a lot of time thinking about the evidence surrounding death. I've done, I don't know how many shows, 50 shows on the near-death experience and the scientists who are investigating that and the skeptical arguments against it. And I felt a need to just exhaustively look at every
this was one of the reasons why I couldn't wait to talk to you about this, by the way.
Well, I think that one of the problems with, it's not a problem, it's just one of the limitations of that research is, but that by definition, it leads you up to that, that point, but never really says much beyond that,
Right.
And that's one of the problems with the skeptical kind of thing. And it's just the reality of it. They can really get you spinning your wheels where you spend all your time like, no, we've proved it. It's not, hypoxia. It's not this. And it's, the blind see after they're dead and all the rest of it, and like, let me prove it this way. And there's a conspiracy over here. And Eben Alexander really did see a rainbow. Every other thing, you can talk about. And then at the end of the day, you're like exhausted and like, okay, well, what does that mean? So what does the questions you're asking? What does? Yeah,
well, I've always felt that the fact that they've come back means that they don't know because they didn't die, right? They can't tell you if there's life after death because they didn't die.
Well, they did die.
They did, but then But see, Alex,
hold on. So that's an important point, right? So they didn't die,
or their spirit didn't leave their body or something. I don't know why, but they They didn't complete the death process.
Here's the problem with that. Like, again, I'm a
skeptic.
Go all Skeptiko on you now.
Go for it.
Lay it out, brother.
But it to me, it's like the simulation thing is you got to get kind of precise. So like one of the top resuscitation researchers and physicians in the world is a guy named Dr. Samparnia, right? Formerly at Cornell, now at, I think, Stony Brook in New York. Top in his field in resuscitation, not in woo-woo. So, resuscitation, he is an expert on what we would call death. When does death occur? When is clinical death? At what rate can we revive people from that state, which we call death? I mean, this is medically, and this is in the journals. They don't go, oh, we resuscitated him, so he isn't really dead. They go, no, by every measure we have of determining or saying whether someone is alive or dead, that person was dead. They were dead for 7 minutes. They had no heartbeat. They had no brain activity, and they had no response in their eyeballs, brainstem, the rest of that. We call that dead. They were in that state for 7 minutes, and then they were resuscitated. So if we're going to be precise, we got to say, no, that's death as we understand it. And then we can apply another definition on it at a later time and say, well, your soul death or something like that. But we have no idea what that means. So from the standpoint of clinical death, because that's something that's like I'm saying, you got to nail it down with these skeptics, because they'll say that all the time. They didn't really die. It's like, you don't know what you're talking about. They died. That's
they didn't finish the death process.
Well, what's that death process?
I don't know. That's the thing.
Well, then we're not saying anything.
Okay, so all I'm saying is that I don't think that what we consider life after death and existence after death can be proven by a near-death experience. That's kind of what I mean. They didn't finish the process to get to that end point to say, oh yeah, it's awesome here. You got to come.
Well, that's just a matter of semantics. I mean, if we're going to play that game and we're going to enter into that discussion, then we have to have certain parameters. And I think it's like the neuroscience model of consciousness that we have is the dominant paradigm, is the dominant model. And when that is completely overturned, you can't then turn around and say, yeah, well, that's totally not valid anymore. But I'll tell you what, there's something else happening there. I don't know what it is, but it's like, no, you just got to say, okay, they're dead and there's life after death, because we thought this was, irreversible. We don't understand.
Right.
Think about what's going on here before you dismiss it, too quickly. And that's the whole think about what's going on here.
Right.
You have no brain activity, and yet you have some kind of visual information, visual experience that's coming in from a point of reference that is impossible. Full stop.
That just proves to me that consciousness is not local.
Well, and is not time bound, and is not
right.
So it's like, okay, yeah, well, so okay, yeah, that's it. So what is that?
I'm all in on the life after death. I was just playing devil's advocate there.
Well, so if you have, as you said, with lucidity earlier on, and in context to dreaming, although this whole thing is a dream, in my opinion, but if you have lucidity when you're actually not necessarily tethered to your experience of your vessel, your body, and then you have, so with you, Alex, there's this yogic slant. Where does this lead you intellectually and at a gut level as to what goes on after the process, after the clinical experience of death, when the body is clinically dead? What goes on with you?
Again, I haven't really, it's funny. It's really funny. It's a good question, because it makes me think and wonder why I haven't kind of contemplated that on that level, because I really haven't. I really haven't. The intellectually or at that deeper level, I've kind of gone all the way up to that point of, what can I do to prepare for that? What should I do to live my life in a way that prepares me for that? But no, I don't. That's funny. What do you think? What do you guys think?
I love how you're a 10-year pro, and you're always turning this stuff back on Jerry and I. It's hilarious. I'm giving you a hand. What do we think about death, about what the afterlife, or all that? What we just asked Alex.
I think there's as you stated, a hierarchy of some sort of progression that happens.
But I think Nisha's question, as I understood it, is What do you think about? I mean, how all the kind of trite.
I know we wrote the question.
How are you going to face? Are you going to face death? What is that going to be like? Are you prepared for it? Are you ready for what comes after?
Her question is, when you die, are you worm food or do you live on in another form? And follow up to that, does it scare you or not? I think that's kind of what she's getting at. No?
Yeah.
Yes?
What do you think? What do you think?
Well, go on, Jerry.
No, I don't want to screw up your question.
No. So no, I think Alex got where I was going, and just on that, my perspective at this point, and of course it's always changing. I allow myself that new data, right? I feel like this is all kind of dream time, and as I mentioned earlier, this whole fractal idea, but I don't get caught up in it. I try not to get caught up in it, and I am one of those people that does observe as much as possible the empty circle, because I do have a daily meditative practice for years and years. And so I think that I feel like there's consciousness in everything, and that everything has a form of consciousness. And so when I say that, I'm talking in context to what I'm experiencing. So I'm experiencing the planet and the people and the things on the planet, the rocks, nature. And now we've moved into digital realities, which has changed, I guess, nuanced my ideas.
Do you experience that feeling of consciousness ever? Do either one of you experience that the plants are alive, the forest is alive?
I do, yes. And that's why I've come to that. And so I'm one of those people that there's something about, it could be my astrological chart. I don't know where you stand and all that, but there is a lot for me there. And I'm a Taurus at the sun, but I have a good amount of stuff that makes me ride some of the stability currents. And in that, being out in nature, wholeheartedly experience consciousness through this planet. I have at times, without being on drugs, felt like the planet was breathing, like it was inhaling and exhaling, and I was folding into it. This was, just experiences like that. And again, I have a meditative practice, and I have, I go off kilter if I somehow my daily life gets too crowded and there's no space for that. So yes, simply yes, is my answer to that, Alex.
Very cool. Jerry, how about you? Are you more dense like me and have to work to get anything?
No, I don't. I think that I have strange thoughts. Put it out there right now. That whatever spirit is comes here to experience life, and then you leave. And everything in this container, whatever it is, dies. It's a container of death. We worship death. We eat death. Everything around us dies. It's the paradigm.
But is the planet death to you, Jerry? I get this with the container. My vessel is just that. It's a husk. Yeah. But how do you feel about the planet? Like as far as and nature and that, is that all?
Honestly, personally, I don't know if there is a planet.
That's why I love you.
I don't know. I'm 50-50 on space existing, by the way. So,
yeah.
As it's described to us. I personally think space is like an expression of consciousness outwardly. And we haven't mastered consciousness enough to travel to these places by going within. So we have to see it that far away. It's that distance, but it's like a representation. It's a desktop for consciousness. Those are all icons out there. You click one and go to it. Other planes of existence.
I've said this in our last few shows, and I'm going to reiterate it again here because I just watched the last episode. The second season of Westworld is blowing my mind for these kinds of thoughts, and especially when we're talking organic matter, because that's what they are. That's where the tech has taken them. They're organic like us. They're made out of all the same stuff, and their consciousness, which has now been is now sentient, is housed in a sphere. right? Jerry, you've seen this. It looks like a little crystal ball in a way. It's very deep in there.
What are we talking about? Westworld?
Westworld, yeah. This last episode really gave that, it's a sphere, crystalline type sphere buried within organic matter, a brain like ours. And it's their consciousness, and they can move that around.
They don't have brains. That's just a wrapper.
Well, the new models, they're identical to humans, and they make that clear in this last episode.
Oh, okay. I heard them say that, but I thought that was more of
bone, blood.
Yeah, okay.
And they've given us, and they've shown it to us, to see that there's brain matter and stuff like that. But that's beyond the point. That just makes the point that gives us that poses the question. Again, where is our consciousness? What is the consciousness? And aside from so obviously when you're sentient, there's a sense of self, right? But there's so much more also. And what Westworld does is, because they're all tied in together, right? Hive mind. And yet there's also the egoic state, the I-ness. And so I am finding this fruitful information to meditate on. It ties into a lot of it's synth theory, really. Is it for me? This is on our invisible table. This is actually a real. This is a reality that I am chewing on. It's fodder.
Oh, you need to watch the show Humans from England. Have you seen that,
I
Alex?
love it. Mishka and all that. The sex worker.
Yeah,
it's like she got my name.
If you want to contemplate what is, intelligence, what is artificial intelligence, what is consciousness, what is a person, what is a human, watch that show, and it's like, whoa, wait a minute. Not sure what I'm watching here. Yeah, Westworld is interesting, but I've always taken the stance that they're showing us what we really are. We're the hosts.
Well, and the greater point here is, where's consciousness? And so, as we're talking about like death,
it's the ether.
And so, is it the ether? It's the ether?
Good enough.
What do you think, Alex?
Again, I'm drawn to, philosophically and experientially, there being this divide. And I know that in some sense there can't really be this divide, but I can experience the divide of the observer, the one who observes. And what I observe from that position is the Westworld monkey mind. And, it's, where was I? It's no different than when you go back and look through history, and you look at the Romans, and, they all went to the Colosseum, and they were constantly needing to be stimulated. And, there's a difference between that and the observer, the quiet one that, you said you could get to in your meditation, and then I could get once in a great while. But it just all clicks then. It's like the Richard Miller questions. It's like, do I need to go there at all, or do I need to just observe? And when I observe, everything looks different. It all looks different. And none of that, all the thinking seems, just to say it's less important is like the most huge understatement in the world. It just doesn't even seem to be what it is when I'm 90% of the time when I'm conscious. It's just like, there's nothing, I don't need to think. I just need to be, And that's
right.
But that's what I experience, because I don't experience, I'm pretty dense spiritually. I don't have these experiences as much as, like I've said on the show, and it drives some people crazy, and other people, especially men, can really relate to it. My wife, she says, oh, I have to feel it, before I can know it. And I'm like, really? Opposite for me. I have to know it before I can feel it, before I'd even trust to feel it. I have to know it. I have to study it, So to me, the intellectual understanding of the observer, of the meditative state, of the, is there anything I need to do to be? No, I don't need to do anything. I don't even need to think. I am always there. The knowledge of that then allows me to experience that even just a little bit.
In that, though, and so I agree. And I think that one of the things I always talk about, I feel like my whole role in life, I came to this feeling like I was an observer. I was always estranged from the race. You know, I was always kind of in the corner watching and love observing. And part of all the chatter is is pushing it out of the circle and observing it in that way. Like this the whole thing Jung was talking about in observation of the unconscious, in his encounter with the unconscious, was the projection into the outer world. So by doing this and having these kinds of discussions, we're only talking to ourselves in the end. But that idea is big because we're all part of that somehow. There's somehow we're all woven into it. And even though we can envision that we're projecting all this out, that all this is just outer world stuff, in the outer world exists you and Jerry. In my outer world, now I've got Alex out there, I've got Jerry and people in the chat and all this. And so I'm observing more of what's going on internally. And so the chatter serves a greater purpose, I think, sometimes. It's like building an ant mound. You dig out a little bit of earth and you put it on top, and then eventually you have those great big monuments to all your digging.
I hear you.
I don't know. That's just me going.
I think it's a big mistake to diss the chatter. It is,
Yeah.
It's like, I saw this great, or I heard this great bit of advice. I always love watching and listening to Rick Archer's show, Buddha at the Gas Pump. I'll plug his show every time I can because it's this smorgasbord of people who are in this process of awakening, enlightening. But one of the recent guys I heard on there that I thought was really good is Baba Shiva. I forget his name, but you'll find Baba Shiva on there. Older, pure yogic guy, from India, 40 years and all that. But
there's a channel. He's got a channel on YouTube.
Yeah.
Well, people around him. I subscribe. I love him. So
there's this story, Nish. See if you remember this, that I thought was really good. He goes, this was so practical. This is the part that connects me because it is practical in the sense that I need that practical experiential stuff before I can kind of jump into the spiritual stuff. Mm-hmm. Some guy asks a question and goes, hey, I can't meditate. Every time I meditate, my stomach just gets in knots, and I'm like, man, I've been there. I know what he's talking about. And his answer I thought was so beautifully simple and it was so insightful. He goes, oh, yeah, you're trying too hard. He goes, all you're supposed to do is just observe. Mm-hmm. You're supposed to put your attention right here and just watch. Mm-hmm. And that is such a breakthrough to me. The way I interpret it, and I've written it down to myself for my daily reminder of meditations, is it's the easiest thing in the world. The easiest thing in the world. No matter how much I'm drawn to, going to Monkey Mind Hang or getting it, this mm-hmm. is easier. It's easier than all of it because all I have to do is just watch. And there's a truth there that is like, the intellectual truth is, how could it be any other way?
Absolutely. It's natural.
If it wasn't the easiest in the world, it wouldn't be true. So all the rest of the stuff we create is all the Westworld stuff is more complicated than the easiest thing is just to observe.
Yes. I talk about this a lot because people have all this, for lack of a better word, dogma around meditation. Like it's you got to sit in this position, you got to do this breath or that. And it's like, just sit, just be, look out a window, just stop, it's contemplate. It's so, Alex, it's the naturalist thing. We naturally do it. And we don't allow so then what? The chatter in the outer world. What are you doing? You should be being productive. Yeah. It's that kind of stuff where, the world around us is kind of says, well, you can't just sit there and look out the window, or you can't just, you have to be doing something. They have to be filling the space with something that we can see, the we's in the world. And so in a way, it's like, I heard, oh my God, this is so funny. Actually, I'm not going to say it, but if like in nature, if you dig a hole, nature covers it, fills it in. So it is so simple. It's so simple. I love hearing your the emphasis in your voice, because I know you know that.
Well,
what is going on here?
Yeah, it's knowing it and knowing it at a different level. So it's like, but it's cool. It's fun.
For me, one of the things I contemplate often, and it's just been a wave in my life. There's just been a lot of death brought into my life from an early age. And I came in aware already, feeling stuck in flesh. And I've told that story a million times. And
the issue is still there. You kind of
emptiness is oftentimes, am I back?
Yes.
Is the contemplation of death. And so not of preparing for it, and not of the lessons I've learned thus far and all that kind of hubris, but the idea of me in it now. So the nowness, that where we strip away the ideas of time that are swirling around us constantly. And I'm constantly hit by the fact that it is now, it is always. And one of the things that leads me into talking about dreams and people's experience of dreams is because that's such an easy gateway to get to that conversation. And in my personal experience with lucidity in dreams, and I want to state that I loved your ideas that you brought forward with the in and out of lucidity through dream, is those moments when I'm like, yes, I'm in a dream. So there's, Nish is sleeping. However, I don't actually say these things, but I'm just trying to say these out loud so I sound a little bit coherent. Is okay. So this is it. This is whatever my state of awareness is at this point, that's not attached to, once I move through the scare factor, because I did go through a scare factor when I realized I was dreaming and feeling like maybe I had died, right? That I think a lot of people go through that. Or am I dying? There was this ever-present taste of an eternity, like of a deeper sense of self that was not bound by the narrative that my ego is existing in at the time. Do you know what I'm saying?
I do, intellectually. I think, yeah. I haven't experienced that, but I definitely hear you totally. And I've heard that from other people, and it's kind of like very intriguing.
Alex?
Yes, did you hear me?
No, that was like one long robot.
It's all you. It's all you tonight. I saw,
was it on my end? Because I saw Alex talking, and then all of a sudden a smile. I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
Well, I can try and tackle it again. I think we need to put more coins in the meter. We're at 2 hours.
Yes, we usually wrap up around here, and so I guess. I
asked for questions.
I guess this. Did you get any, Jerry?
I got one. How do you relate material world to time perception?
Well, I think you kind of tossed that out. I mean, it doesn't really.
He further clarified it. So it seems to me, that relation of time is based on experiencing matter, and the life in it is not time-based.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to. I don't want to be flippant, because it's extremely. It's like you, when you brought it up. It's like, man, you're right, dude. That's like super profound. Now, what are we going to do? Because it shatters our, we don't want to play that game. Let's ignore it. Shut up and calculate. Consensus reality. No, I really do see you. We really do have time, because otherwise I can't function. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I do think, to his other point, that time is relative based on what you're doing. Because, when you're doing something great and fun, time flies. And when you're sitting at a desk at school, it seems like forever. So your perception changes based on your state of mind, or how much of your left brain is in it, I would say.
Well, that's definitely true.
Yeah. So if you're just having a great time and you're not thinking or worrying, then time is of no matter, literally and figuratively. Was your question? I don't think anyone asked it. Oh, there's one more. What do you think about the role of genetic memory in or around consciousness? That's a good question.
It is a good question. And I think in particular, if you ever have to battle the skeptics, or if you have a grumpy old uncle that you have to sit with at the Thanksgiving table, a little story about epigenetics, it goes a long way in terms of
yes.
How does that little 6th generation chicken that's separated at birth still respond to that weird smell that was introduced to his mother long ago? And if no one knows that story, go and research it. But it's so funny also, just, we jump past in this whole conversation the materialist thing. But every once in a while, you just got to shake yourself and say, wait a minute, this is still the idiotic dominant paradigm that the whole term epigenetics, it's like, epa what? I mean, how is this? It's not above. I mean, it calls into question whether what we even think of as genetics has anything to do with anything. I mean, it's morphic fields of Rupert Sheldrake. It's epimorphic fields, maybe. It's also like, one of my favorite things lately is the whole neuroplasticity discovery. We didn't discover neuroplasticity anymore. Right. Columbus discovered, the continent over here. It was here. It was here for a long time. He just sailed over and bumped into it. Neuroplasticity is the way that these jelly thing inside your skull works. We didn't discover that.
Okay, we have another question from Seven Raven. That other question was from Effluent for you. Thank you, Tom. His name's Tom. And Seven Ravenwolf wants to know if you have any thoughts on the false white light story. If you're familiar with those.
What is that? Now tell me.
I don't know who started it or who. I don't know where the story originated, but there's a conspiracy story that the white light that people see when they die is actually the archontic tractor beam that pulls your soul back into the reincarnation cycle.
Yeah, I have heard. I have heard.
Okay.
Interesting. And I would relate it back to what I was throwing out there as the kind of Occam's razor thing. Occam's razor to me on UFOs is that they're flying saucers from other planets. I don't know if they are or not, but it's a way out there explanation, but it sure as hell sounds better than anything else I've heard. The Occam's razor on death, what after death, near death experience, what that tells us is you die and you go to heaven. I don't know what that means. I don't know what heaven means. I don't know what God means. I don't know any of that stuff. But that's the Occam's razor. If you go look like Dr. Jeff Long, who is a radiation oncologist in Louisiana, who started seeing people die and got interested in the stories that came back when they didn't die, and so started collecting all these and organizing them in a systematic scientific way, and you start looking at that data set, it's overwhelming. I mean, yeah, people die and they go to heaven. Most of them see God. Some of them see some terrifying things. Yeah, but that's a small percentage. And, we don't know what that is, but we know that this is the experience that most people see. So the, you know, being sucked into the, maybe, but Occam's razor would suggest otherwise.
What do you think, and to that point you made about some people seeing hell versus heaven, what do you think about the idea that they somehow know they're not going to die, but they get a taste of what they're expecting because of some kind of reflection? You know, like they were bad in their life and they expect to go to hell for it, so that's what manifests for them when they die.
Sure. You know what I also think, and I've never really kind of shared this too much because it's out there. I don't have any way of backing
We won't
this
tell.
up.
We won't tell.
Well, it's in your guys' domain because it's the dream thing. What the lucid dream thing has taught me is the mechanics of this way that I create these stories. You know, because I've been caught in that state of not only being in the lucidity, like I told you, but then slipping into the non-lucidity and saying that, oh my God, I'm just creating this whole thing right in the process. So then that definitely, Jerry, opens up the door to, oh yeah, I could create any kind of reality there. And that would be a perfect reality to create, you know, as
you could imagine if there are infinite realities, infinite parallel dimensions, whatever you want to call it, and your consciousness can only focus on one of them at a time. Put it that way. So yours is here. It's locked here for some reason. Imagine if you could unlock it and move before you die to another one. It's your life. You're allowed to be in it. Maybe those other realities are part of your dream, your other dreams, what you dream about, you know? No, but thank you. I think one more question and then we'll call it quits. Yeah, I know what nootropics are. Do you have any thoughts on nootropics?
I don't refresh my memory.
Sorry, smart drugs.
Oh yeah.
Makes your dendrites brushier.
I think it's a good question. You know, a related thing is I used to kind of really put down the AI thing. You know, back when I was in school, I went back to the University of Arizona as a graduate assistant to get a PhD in artificial intelligence.
Oh, wow.
I didn't want to work. I was like, this sucks. I want to go be a college professor. So I did that for a couple of years and I said, this sucks. I want to go do something. But I was right in the middle of that AI stuff, at least a little bit, you know. So I've always been kind of like AI, you know, that ain't gonna happen. But I've changed my opinion, and what changed it for me is I kind of like to play chess. You know, I just play it on the computer and stuff like that. It's interesting to me. And have you seen this thing where Google
Go, or the Go bot?
Well, Google came up with a chess program. So we're going to date ourselves here, Jerry. But you know, Big Blue
Watson, right? Yep.
Was the chess champion, and they beat Kasparov, I think, or whatever.
Yep,
the world champion. Yeah, and they made a great documentary on it and how they did it, and they just threw processing power at it and just figured out every combination. So then IBM has been the best chess player in the world has been a computer for a while now, you know, all that stuff. So it's like Google comes along and they develop this program that learns chess, and they put it against the Big Blue IBM, and it beats it. Yeah, in something, I'm going to get it wrong. It's like 4 hours. 4 hours, or maybe it was 40 hours. I don't know, whichever one it was. But it learned it. It played millions of games, and it beat it. And it's like the amount. So that sounds like a geeky story, you know, but the amount of time and effort that went into that, and that it could learn and go, whoa. So I think to me, the way that relates to the psychotropic kind of thing is that 4 hours.
4 hours.
It's amazing.
So psychotropic, you know, it's, you know, stoking up that other computer, adding a little memory, you know, it's like the extended, I mean, that's coming too, right? The wearable, you know, you're going to have implanted.
That's the thing. We don't need implants. We could probably transfer stuff through frequency. They just have to give us that tech that the Army has. You
know? And we're going to line up for it, you know, and not all of us will, but some of us will. And that's just the reality of it, and you don't even have to, you know.
So after
we already do, though, with like say LASIK surgery, people do it. Wouldn't you?
I had it.
So yeah, I mean, all these things that we think are scary, you know, but the good side of all this is the enhancements of our life.
Our definition of body modification is going to expand as our awareness expands.
Yes.
Put it that way.
And the way it will be introduced is not as diabolical and as conspiratorial as people think. It's like the Italian guy who's doing the head transplant supposedly this year.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Which I think is another one. It falls in this general category of, you know, I just shut up about that stuff because I shut up and I go, please tell me, because all bets are off now. You're going to prove it one way or another. You know, there's not going to be a lot of bets one way or another, questions one way or another.
Yeah.
But, you know, when people wonder about the ethics of that, it's a good reminder of, you know, you're going to have guys like, oh, they should never do that. And this, you know, this, and then they're going to wheel out that guy, the quadriplegic who's been in that condition for years and says, please, I'll do anything.
Yeah.
And you go, oh my God, because we all put ourselves in that situation. And we go, if I was there, I'd want that ability to make that choice. I wouldn't want to have somebody from the, you know, phony church tell me, oh no, son, that's what God wants for you. I'd be like, well, maybe God wants this other thing for me too. Just let's see, you know.
Yeah, I'm all for this great side of science, matter.
I just wanted to talk about the AI again because Google's had a couple of AI things that were interesting. That was one. The AlphaGo was another, where it beat like the best Go masters I could find, but in a way that the other player didn't understand what the computer was doing.
Right.
That was really interesting.
Right.
The second one was a Google Translate bot, AI. They took it offline because it had developed its own language.
Yes.
Its own common denominator language for everything that it translated.
Right, right.
They didn't take it offline. I'm sorry. Facebook took theirs off, which also created a special a language to discuss things within itself with.
Yeah, we can do this a lot better. You and me. Computer.
Exactly.
That's right.
And one of my pet projects is finding parallels between echoes of what's happening in reality in media in the last couple of years. You know, people would call that predictive programming. I think it's more of an echo of what's to come. You know, but anyway, that's my theory. The point being, there's in almost every show where people get implants or in humans. It happened in humans. I don't remember. I've seen so many shows lately with android people, but when humans get enhanced with tech, they develop their own language. It's like in every single one of these shows. And it's really interesting to see that in there. And then to have these AIs doing it, like, it's creepy. Anyway, I could go on and on about AI.
I know. We could go on and on.
I think the big takeaway, though, is that people need to realize that AI is not necessarily consciousness. And they need to be kept separate because they're separate things.
Sentience is the thing.
I want to say sentient. I think you can be sentient and artificial. But I don't know. I really don't know.
Yeah, right. I mean, this is a whole different discussion.
Yeah.
Well, I think it is and it isn't. And I think that I'm just much more open to, you know, like I said, I used to be much more on the other side of taking a hard line that, you know, no, it's not. And, you know, it's some things, but, you know, I don't know. I don't know when that head transplant happens, man. We're all going to be.
Is it still Bob? Is it still Bob or is it a new guy, right? Great. All right. Well, that's the show for tonight. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. I don't know who's next week. I'm sorry.
So Alex's links and all that.
Alex's links are all in the description for the video. And please check out and subscribe to his podcast because it's excellent. And we thank you, Alex. Do you have anything else to push or plug or?
No, guys, it's been an awesome conversation. I appreciate
this.
Thank you so much.
Wonderful.
Well worth the wait.
Let's stay in touch.
Definitely. So you hang on while I hang up on these people. All right. Thank you, everyone. Take care and have a great night.
Thank you. Everyone in the chat I missed, of course.
My stream.